Hi, Miss Chanel here, Language Success Coach, and welcome to our very first episode in the Simple Spanish series. In this episode, which is part one actually of what we're going to examine, we're going to start off looking at the criteria for paper two for the mark scheme. And when I say criteria, I'm not looking at actual paper two questions or going into paper two. I'm really going to the mark scheme section of the syllabus and taking a look at what information is there in terms of assessing your work in paper two of the Spanish exam. So letting you know what I'm going to assume you know what paper two looks like. I'm not going to explain paper two in this video. If you want me to, comment below and I will look at a paper two and give you further explanation on it. Secondly, I am using the CXC syllabus. On screen, you're seeing modern languages. That's because the name of the syllabus is not Spanish. It's not the CSEC Spanish syllabus. It's the modern languages syllabus because whether you're doing Spanish, French, or Portuguese, it's the same information. All right. So if you're doing Spanish and French, you can listen to this video and actually get guidance for Spanish and French. If you're doing Portuguese, you can still get guidance. If you have a friend who's doing French or Portuguese, you can send the video to them. It's the same exact guidance. Okay, same exact criteria. So you can see this is taken from the CSEC Modern Languages. And this is the which version? Revised 2016, because I believe the new syllabus came into effect 2017. Right? So this is what we're going to work with. And I'm going straight directly to our mark scheme area. Now, this video probably is going to have to be done in parts because let me tell you, the mark scheme for modern languages is quite a trip. It's a trip. It's a trip. I'm going to tell you it's a trip. All right. So as I'm going into it, and it's getting a little too heavy in certain sections, skip to the other section, come back to maybe a section later on. I always say it's valuable to know how you're going to be assessed, right? And that way, when you're making certain moves in the exam, you can be very smart about what you're doing. All right. So I think it's valuable. However, it's not working for you. That's okay. You can come off this video. All right. Now, the very first thing that we're going to have to look at is it's the first thing. We're not going to go into it in detail, but it's an explanation of how the marking works in paper two. There are different styles of marking. There's analytical and holistic. The analytical applies to directed situations in section one and reading comprehension in section four, while the holistic works for letter and contextual dialogue. And in fact, because of that, I would do a separate videos with the actual rubric, the grid breakdown rubrics for letter and contextual dialogue. Essentially, with analytical scoring, every single question is marked and scored individually, and then they're scored analytically. You're going to see that for directed situations. Directed situations is the trippiest of the trips, right? Holistic scoring is you're going to analyze the entire work um, in one or more areas. All right. So we actually have to look at everything you wrote for holistic scoring, right? Here is where I put my additional disclaimer that what I'm telling you is based on my interpretation of the syllabus. I am not officially affiliated with the CXC. So this is just my interpretation, which I have used and I've seen that it's guided my students for exam. I've been doing this for the last 7 years, and for those 7 years I refer to the syllabus because I've also learned that there are teachers who do not refer to the syllabus. Okay, it's quite scary. Now there are certain reasons. I'm digressing a little bit. There are certain reasons why a teacher may not do it. Certain reasons. There are reasons. Okay. However, I, especially when we're in exam year, I like to follow what CXC has and not what I think, right? So we are going so this is a breakdown of the errors and how they will identify errors. I don't like this. It's not bad. It's what they use, but my brain does not work with this. My brain does not work with this, but it is very helpful. And these are errors that you would have to look at. Okay, you see word count limit is here. Please do not ignore the people's word count there. They're really adamant about it, right? So we're going to look at directed situations. Now, I am going to assume you know what directed situations are and you're not staring at the screen like, what is she talking about? Right? But it's the 10 questions and their total will be 30 marks. It's 3 marks a question. And these are teeny tiny situational questions which require teeny tiny responses. I'm saying teeny tiny because they're supposed to be single sentence or single phrase responses, right? I said single. Let me say simple phrase responses dependent on the context of the question. So you're going to be assessed on your appropriateness. They've underlined the word appropriateness. You're going to be assessed on your appropriateness and your correctness of expression. That's what they're going to work with in terms of grammatical structure and spelling. That's what correctness of expression means here. And in terms of how it's assessed, a teacher is supposed to look at the response you give that you write and see whether it includes all the elements of the situation. If you look at one of these questions, you understand what I mean by all the elements of the situation, and that adequately communicates meaning. When I hear your response, it's going to gel. It's like a question and response. It's going to make sense, right? So essentially, something that's really crucial is to ensure that you get the full context of the situation, right? And you answer all the elements of the situation, and then you're marked out of 3. If your response is partially appropriate, meaning you're not fully appropriate to the situation, you can't, and you don't have all the elements, you're going to get a 2. Right? So this is how you're marked. You get all the elements. I understand perfectly what you mean. 3, automatically. I look at you. You kind of have some of the elements where I don't totally get what you mean. That's an auto. That's an instant 2. And they're saying you put a lot. Well, you don't have to worry about that. But it's still a 2, right? And then if your response, whether it's vocab or structure, does not make any sense, and the meaning is distorted in some way, shape, or form, and I can't really decipher where you're going with it, then 0 is the mark. You get your Christmas ornament. Yeah, Christmas ornaments. 0 is an egg. I was telling the students who were doing English that I literally, for my students, when they get 0, I decorate it. So it's Christmas time, they get eggs. They get Christmas ornaments right now, right? So that's how you mark the section. You look at, does it communicate meaning in terms of the context, and assign marks, and it's either 3 or 2. There is no 1. And some of you are like, Miss, I've gotten 1 in that. Let me show you how they get 1s. So the 1s, and I'm going to go to the 1s. This section actually takes away marks, right? I'm just going to quickly. You actually get marks deducted if you have way too many errors. So 0 to 3 errors, you won't get marks deducted. Please don't take this as an opportunity to create errors and just leave them. Okay, that's not what this is about. But basically 0 to 3, according to the syllabus, there are 0 marks deducted for errors. For the 6 errors, you get 1 mark deducted. 7 to 9, 2, 10 and more, 0. Right? So, right. So when the marks are deducted, then you'll get your actual final assessment. So if it is you got a 3 in terms of making sense, but in terms of errors, you had 7 to 9 errors in your sentence. Good Lord. Then you get 1 mark. Yeah, that's not too nice, right? Or if you got a 2 initially, but you had 4 to 6 errors, 1 mark is deducted. You just get 1 mark. That's how it works. So essentially, I would say minimize your errors. 2, the longer your sentence, the more opportunities are for errors. Because if you have a 5 word sentence, again, depending on context, depending on appropriateness, if you have a 5 6 word sentence, you're definitely not going to hit that 2 mark error, yeah, threshold. I know this is a little confusing. Most people are surprised that this is in here, but yes, you actually get double marked in a sense. You get marked for appropriateness in direct situation, and then you get marked for errors. You get deducted for errors. All right. Um, so that's key to note. Uh, I actually want you to pay attention to this section where they're saying if you've written more than one sentence with a slash. This is what they're telling the persons who are marking, because it's most of these situations don't require multiple sentences. They don't want you to write an essay, and I know it can be confusing. I think they've been trying to improve the questions that they put for this section, because when you saw something like your mother wants to know why you skipped school, what did you tell her? It's kind of like, what am I going to tell her? I'm going to have to write a whole essay because you've got to butter up mom. But they don't want you buttering up mom. They just want what why you skipped school, right? So that's the challenge with this section. They just want one line. They will allow 2 short, highly relevant sentences, but in my opinion, that's a very vague. Uh, uh, that's kind of vague. It's kind of vague. That to me is kind of vague, and it's one or two there are 1 or 2 questions that sometimes come that could fit that. And I've seen where you can make one sentence work. So please do not write about everybody and keep using the word meaning and, to just prolong your sentence. No, please don't do that. Just try to write one simple sentence. But yes, this is section. This is the section. There's some information on grammar, but what I just spoke about in terms of the appropriateness and making sure you hit all the elements that are requested of the question in direct situation is really key, and reviewing your work, proofreading it so that you minimize errors. Please do that. You will definitely help yourself in the long run, okay? And then we're going to go to letter. I know a lot of people don't like letter. Guys, 30 marks here. Let's make it, right? 130 to 150 words. Letters are very, in my opinion, easy. If you guys want me to give you an insight into how to do letters, just comment below and I'll add it to the Simple Spanish series, okay? So, so for letter, you're going to look at your fluency of language, your coherence, your clarity, your appropriateness of the situation, because this is yet again another situation question. It's a situation question. When you look at how the question is asked and those little cues they give you, that's what you need to follow. And it's going to give you a guide. It acts as a guide for you to respond to your question. You must ensure your grammar is accurate, your vocab and your idiom expressions are also up to date, and that it hits length. Please do it within the word limit, okay? You need to check your word limits. Now there's this range, there's this secret range, I guess you could say, that CXE has. I still say try to hit the 130 to 150. Okay, but please note that they will put a slash after a certain point, and they advise you're not going to read beyond the cutoff point, right? So those of you who have looked at my information in the Excellent English series on Mark Theme, you will have noticed that there's no, for summary, there's a cutoff, right? And they mention a cutoff for that. Most of the others don't mention it, but honestly, I think they're not going to really read if you write 800 words for an argumentative, right? In Spanish, they're saying they're going to put a slash and cut off. They're not reading anything, and that can affect your mark. So please be mindful. Always review your work and proofread it to make sure that you don't have grammatical errors that will get you And this is just a note on students not doing a letter and doing something else, because right now we only have letters. There's no option. So it's not like letter or composition. So if it is that someone has a letter, sorry, if someone has a composition rather than a letter, or does a short answer, or does not write on the question, then, they're saying they're going to refer it to the examining committee. So please just write a letter, guys. It's not that hard. It's not that hard, right? And that's it. Review your work. A lot of letter has to do with how you're preparing for letter. This is the so this is some of the technical grammatical stuff. This is what the actual rubric looks like in terms of the marking. I will discuss this in another video. And we're going on to contextual dialogue, which I also like. I think this is trickier than letter. I think this can be tricky, but I do have a very good strategy for this. So this is 80 to 100 words and just 20 marks. So this is a lot less than letter, by the way. Please note. All right. But again, these are marks that you can take advantage of, and make sure you get as many as possible so you can get a really high grade, right? If you've been doing Spanish, whether you like it or not, I know a lot of people end up doing Spanish and they don't like it, but some are really determined to get their mark. If you're determined to get your mark, please do what you need to do to get your mark, okay? So for dialogue, you need to ensure that your content and appropriateness of responses are on point. So again, we have another context, right? Everything is context so far in this particular paper, right? Because you're doing language, and language responses are based on the situation you're in. Coherence and clarity, because you're responding and filling in the blanks of dialogue, it must make sense. Grammar, can't do a language exam and ignore grammar. And then length, hit the word limit. Okay, they do have a secret extension, a secret range, but I still recommend you try and hit the word limit. Okay, if you're in doubt that the answer meets the minimum required for length, generate a word count. You should check your words. You should always check your words, and of course, you're not going to mark anything beyond the maximum word count. Okay, I had to pause. I had to pause because there's a lot of noise. So I hope I am starting back at the correct spot. Because I do live recordings, I don't do edited recordings. But essentially, what I want you to get from this is these your appropriateness to your responses is what you're going to really be focusing on, and the fact that you have as minimal grammar errors as possible. Okay. And of course there is this rubric which I will look at on its own in another video. And then we get to reading comprehension, which I actually love. The reading comprehension, it tends to be very basic and easy. And the difference, your responses have to be in English, all right? They have to be in English, but don't think that's easy. It means that you need to understand the Spanish or the French or the Portuguese that you're reading. So what they do is you get 10 questions that have a total of 20 marks, and you will see the range, and this is what it should look like. So 1 mark, you're either correct or you're not correct, right? That's how you give how they are awarded. In terms of 2 marked questions, fully, partially, totally incorrect, right? So fully correct, 2 marks, partially 1, totally incorrect, 0. And then for those that are out of 3 marks, fully, partially, and partially can get 2 or 1. Obviously, if you're closer to fully correct, you might get a 2, right? And then 0 if it's totally incorrect. And that is it. This is essentially what paper 2 looks like. Orals looks different, so that's why I'm not including orals in here. And paper 1 definitely looks different. If you want to see what a paper 1 looks like, just look in my channel. I think the most popular video is still the 2019 paper 1. It's good to have an idea of what paper 1 looks like because most people do not know. So you can check that video. And of course, if you have any questions or queries, you can leave a comment below. I'll make future videos to add to the Simple Spanish series, and look out for the explanation for the rubrics for letter and for contextual dialogue in another video. Thank you so much for being here. Miss Channel saying bye and have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.